All right, everyone, welcome back into another fantasy golf video. Going to be breaking down the U.S. Open here for you guys. If you have any questions, make sure to get those in, and I'll be happy to answer those. We already are getting some questions coming in as well, which is great. So with that, let's kind of just jump into that. So kind of the first question that we have here is going to be kind of what is the weather like, any AM advantage? So no, we are not seeing any particular advantage, but as always, I will be chasing a little bit more of the AMT times, specifically for first round leader betting, props betting as well. Like I'm just a little bit more comfortable chasing those bets because we know the course is going to play the most similar will in the morning. Typically speaking, you don't have any, and they can tap it down, but you don't have any foot marks or anything like that. Maybe they water it tonight, which I'm kind of expecting, given the reports that they have basically lost the greens in some aspects. So I do expect it to get watered. So maybe they dry out a little bit. But in terms of weather, the weather seems pretty good to go here. So great question there. Let's see. I think we got another one as well. So thoughts on Sam Burns. So Sam Burns, it's a good call out. Let's see here. Give me a second. Sam Burns is interesting. Like I'm not expecting much from Sam Burns this week, in all honesty, but he's certainly someone that can catch fire. Like he hasn't been terrible at all by any means. He's played pretty well in previous U.S. Opens. He's someone that his game typically does set up well for the U.S. Open as well. Typically a good total driver and ball striker, which he kind of has been this year. I mean, still 13th in the field, ball striking, 10th in the field, and total driving. Those are the two most important stats this week: total driving and ball striking. And so I do expect him to have a good week. Like I wouldn't talk anyone out of him as a play. He's someone that in 20 builds, 20 entry max builds, not getting to 150 builds, I am getting to. So just, kind of that type of play where I'm happy to get to him GPPs, 13th best stat fit. And so again, it's no surprise that his good starts majors wise have come at the US Open because his game sets up the best for the US Open. So not a terrible play there. And then let's see. I think we got another question. Gary Woodland, sneaky pick. I wouldn't argue Gary Woodland as a pick. Like if you're on Gary Woodland, I wouldn't say go crazy with it. And I would have to check the ownerships of Burns and Gary Woodland. But yeah, Woodland's like he's made 4 straight cuts. And I know he's played well in previous U.S. Opens, and that's kind of what people are probably trying to get to him with. The fact that he's played well at previous U.S. Opens. I would say there's no need to get to him. And I'll say, like, in comparison, we got someone like Billy Horschel that's right down in that same price tag, I believe, off the top of my head. Yeah, a little bit more expensive, but they're kind of the same player-ish. It's just that Billy Horschel's playing a little bit better right now, so might as well just go with him. And this is another great question. So, yeah, if you guys have questions, make sure to get those in. Happy to answer those questions. And so let me switch scenes here. This one's a little bit better for this. So yeah, great question here. So Aaron Rai or Seb Straka. I actually love Aaron Rai this week, but I don't mind Seb Straka. I get the appeal for Seb Straka. And for that matter, I do want to bring up SunJam because that kind of brings up a secondary point as well. So let's just bring up those 3 golfers here. And so looking at it, Aaron Rai actually ranks out the best out of those 3 golfers because he's a really strong stat fit for this event. Made the cut at the PGA Championship, which is kind of what I'm looking at for event comp course history, if you will. But just been playing well. 5 straight make cuts. We have seen some top 10 finishes for him as well. So he has shown a little bit of that safety and upside that I typically like to look at. Key stat-wise, love the fact that he's striking the ball really well. 8th best in the field in ball striking. So that is something that I think is extremely appealing. And he's at 6'4". So, like, again, why play Gary Woodland when you can get to Aaron Rai? And so let's take Aaron Rai off of that because I do think this is a decent talking point. Look at how similar plays SunJam and Seb Straka are on paper this week. It is kind of crazy. And that just comes due to, look at this. Both of them have 3 top 10 finishes over their past 4 starts. The issue with that is both of their missed cuts at a major. So what do you do with those two? Because they have proven that they kind of suck at majors, but at least recently. So you look at like SunJam missed the cut the PGA Championship, finished 61st at the Masters, 65th in the U.S. Open 2 years ago here, and then last year missed the cut. Seb Straka basically the exact same stuff, and so there is a certain, I think, mentality gap for majors for a lot of players. And I do think it takes them to like make a cut and like produce a good result to finally get over that. And like a player that I'm on the fence with this week as to how much I want to be in on him is like Corey Connors. I think his result last year or at the PGA Championship is kind of huge for Corey Connors. I think that is kind of the step towards having a productive major now. Like people just put a little bit of extra pressure on them. That might be what's occurring with Seb Straka and Sungjae because they both should be good plays. I think both Sungjae and Seb Straka are good GPP plays, but obviously the reason why I'm pulling up Straka and Sungjae together is because Straka is just as good of a play as Sungjae and you can get him $600 cheaper. So I think that's pretty good. What's a good strategy for the $1 million lineup? That's honestly, this week is super hard in the sense that you can make so many good builds. That's been my biggest conundrum this week in general, is just how easy it is to make a good lineup in general. And I wish I could tell you like what the good path is, but the issue is we just have way too many good lineup paths that we can do. I think fair and balanced to me is kind of the way to go this week. But I wouldn't blame anyone if they want a different lineup pass. So I'll kind of just show you guys a couple of different lineup paths that I went with, and we'll go with like Aaron Rai since that was just brought up. You could chase the upside with Seb Straka there, so let's go with those guys, and then you could even go Billy Horschel. Now this is too much. You don't have to play two, and actually let's not do that. Let's go with like Connors, who should be a safe like top 20-ish play, and then Hunan, who's like a great GPP play. So if you do this, like you can still do studs and duds with Scotty and still be left with like a great build. Colin Moore, like this is a solid studs and duds build that also has safety in it, but also has that upside with Seb Straka. Like, if you're playing Straka, you're chasing a GPP, where you could just do more of a fair and balanced approach as well, but still go kind of studs and duds. Let's say, I don't know, Xander, Colin, we'll go Connors and Hunan again, because to me, they're like the lowest of the good plays, I guess, if you will. If someone wanted to play Sam Burns, sure, we'll toss him in there again. This is just for example purposes, but this is my issue. Like last week, could not make a good build. You knew for sure that the build that you ended up on was not going to be good on paper. That was just going to happen. Last week was the most difficult the pricing has been, I think, ever. This week, it's not extremely easy in comparison to like other majors like the Masters, like the PGA Championship. I would say it's a little bit more difficult, but at the same time, you can really still make any good lineup path work. And that's because the U.S. Open field's the most loaded field each year. So, it's natural that that's going to occur. And while we're here, Dustin Johnson on Yahoo, guys, minimum price. I took home second place on Yahoo last week by not being stupid, pretty much. And DJ is not someone that's going to pop up data wise because he's really kind of been terrible. But this does kind of give me vibes of when he 3-putted. I think it was Oakmont to lose the U.S. Open. Kind of this course somewhat gives me same vibes. I think it's mostly because people are starting to mention that they might have lost the greens. Again, if you guys have any more questions, get those in. But I'm going to go ahead and kind of jump into the props segment of this video. I'll show you guys part of the new props tool that I've been working on here as well. Going to show you guys both sides of it, though. So let's go ahead and jump on into the props. And so here we go. So, and this is kind of the beta cheat sheet that I'm working on for golf props right now, right here, or just in general for the prop sheet. Have its own dedicated PGA page. And if you guys are familiar with, the stuff I put out, this is going to very much mimic the cheat sheet for golf. And that's what I'm going for, obviously. So yeah, we'll jump into that, get into the golf tab. And I just want to start with pointing out this as well. So typically speaking, this is going to have what the tournament's average is for that course. The last time we saw this course was in 2014. And so what I did was I used that data from 2014, but I also used the last two U.S. Opens as well. Again, the reason why I'm doing that is because the USGA really wants the course to play, or the event to play, the same each and every year, even though they're at different courses. That's why we see the same stats pop up, as in terms of like key stats. That's why we see those same key stats pop up each and every year in terms of relevance. And so it is a little bit not as good as I would typically like data-wise. And so this data is what is pulling in for the edges, just as an FYI. I think it's still pretty good, but you've been warned, right? So like it is a little bit annoying in that regard. But looking at it here, I would say the edges that we are projected to get are all edges that I would also agree with. And so looking at it right now, sorry, like Tagala, I think is really strong. I think for a good prop bet in terms of getting his over 2.5. And the nice thing I like about a lot of these prop bets that we are getting actually is that some of these you have some decent prop line differences where we're going to see Matt Fitzpatrick's at 3. We can see Ming-Woo Lee's at 3. Patrick Cantley's at 3. Tony Finau's at 3. So and I'll just pull it up here as well. This is the normal tool. Here we go. Yeah, so I already had it sorted by that. So like I really don't mind the idea of running out some of these middles here because for Tony Finau, Ming-Woo Lee to get 4 birdies or better, that seems like it's going to be difficult to do, if that makes sense. So like that is my way of going about attacking the props, is that we have Ming-Woo Lee here, we have Tony Finau here, Tagala. You could potentially run up Matt Fitzpatrick. I don't want to touch Patrick Cantley right now. I'm a little bit worried about his game and kind of how he's been trending going into this. I would say probably bet the under on underdog a little bit more for Patrick Cantley. But for middling purposes, again, it's going to be difficult to see these guys getting to 4 birdies. And so I like that kind of we have a little bit of buffer mixed in there to bet the unders on underdog, knowing that they're probably going to push. That being said, if they push, these prop bets that we're all getting on PrizePicks should all be good prop bets to hit. So 2.5 birdies or better over for Tony Finau, Ming-Woo Lee, Tagala, Matt Fitzpatrick. And so I like all those. And just another view for that. Oh, I need to adjust this. So this is why it's still in beta. I need to color code this the other way. Conditional format the other way. Anyways, all good prop bets there, I would say. JT, you could toss into that mix as well. Again, I think those are going to be all good middles. That's what I'm running out. That's where we are currently getting the biggest edge. Real quickly, we'll take a peek at underdog as well, seeing if we're getting any decent edges there. I'm not sure if we are. And then let's see. I don't know if we have any more questions. Okay, so I'll get into this question here in just a second, just as an FYI. So let's finish up the prop segment here with underdog. And so looking at it right now, it's kind of crazy here. So such a low fantasy score total for round 1, projection-wise for underdog. And that kind of tells us all we need to know about how they expect round 1 to play. That's going to be difficult, right? And so if the greens are not as penalizing, then maybe Sam Burns, Corey Connors can get their overs. Like they might even be able to crush those overs. We'll know pretty early on, actually, how the course is playing, I would say. I will say I don't like touching these 3.5 birdies or better unders for underdog because, again, like the reason why I like these ones, these 3s, is because they still need to get to 4 for the under not to hit, because we're kind of factoring in a push. We know that some of them will be pushes. I'm kind of okay with that. Whereas these don't have the ability to push. And so they still have to get to 4 for that bet not to hit. Rory for his under fantasy score is decent, but nothing we need to go crazy with. Then after that, some fairway hit props. I don't know where you guys are at with that, but I like seeing these grouped together because, and these fairways are pretty big for majors and whatnot for a course that's going to play difficult, kind of bigger fairways in that regard. So I don't mind grouping these together. If you are grouping them together, know that on underdog, the payout gets reduced by a significant margin. But right now, underdog currently has it set up to where they're paying like 2.5x out on 5 slip bets and 6 slip bets. I forget what exactly it is. It's like 2.25, I think, for 5 slip flex bets. And then for 6 slip bets, it's 2.5x. So if you do that, you're kind of negating how much they're reducing that. So again, I like pairing those together. So I think I'm going to run these out together as well on a 6 slip bet as well. And I like them all grouped up together there. So yeah, let's go ahead and get back into some questions here. And this is a phenomenal question, I would say, by Zach here. Noren or Henley, single entry. And that's a 2-tiered question here. And let me just get the data sheets ready here for you guys so I can kind of show you guys that, kind of what I mean by that. And it's going to come down to ownership for both of them. And I believe off the top of my head, Henley is a little bit higher projected owned, but I want to pull that up here real quick. All right. So give me a second here. All right, so looking at it right now, just on paper, they are basically the exact same play. Alex Noren is coming in off of a recent miscut, 78th place finish there. Not terrible, not bad though. The cut at that event was, I believe, T70 in ties, so like not terrible, but not good. That was his only recent miscut. He had been someone that had been playing extremely well. I know someone like jumped in my Twitter DMs and was kind of mentioning the trend of players, and this is something that we typically see, but players that have been just playing extremely well, where they might miss a cut randomly and then go off the next week as well. It's probably safe to say that Noren just had a bad week, especially since he followed it up with a top 25 finish. And that is something that we do see. Some of these players, and I always bring up Jaeger as an example now because I think it's phenomenal. He missed a cut after playing some break off after having like 18 straight make cuts, one of the longest active make cut streaks on the PGA Tour, missed a cut, and then he goes out and wins like in his next event. Sometimes you need that mental reset. And I think that did occur with Alex Noren. He is someone that his game should set up well for this. Love the fact that he had a good finish at the PGA Championship. Pretty good staff hit, strong recent form, still a good specialist. The issue with him is he isn't someone that has really played well in majors, specifically the U.S. Open, when he should have. Like his game does set up well for these U.S. Opens. And then Russell Henley. Yes, Russell Henley's probably going to be a little bit higher owned, and I'll pull that up in a second here. Both of them are pretty strong plays. We know with Russell Henley, typically a little bit too hit or miss to trust, especially in cash, but that might be a little bit played out now because he's been playing extremely well. We see one miscut mixed in there recently, and they've basically been all around like top 25 finishes or better. So really strong there. Played extremely well at the U.S. Open 2 years ago, and so he's a play that I do really like. I've been getting to a decent amount, and kind of going back to those sample lineups I did at the start of this video, it's kind of the issue. We have Henley right there. We have Noren right there. We have Connors right there. We have Benny Ann right there. The question was asked about Sam Burns. Like you could make a case for him. And so that, again, that's the issue this week is that the pricing's kind of bad in the sense that there's some players that are a little bit too cheap from what they should be. So both going to be good plays there. And then, let me try to get that ownership pulled up here because I am curious that can be the difference maker in terms of who we try to get to. We are getting more questions as well. So thoughts on Brooks while I'm loading that. No need to get to Brooks, I would say. He's a little bit too high priced this week. The only reason why you'd be playing Brooks is, kind of blind luck, which is kind of Brooks Koepka to a T. But looking at Brooks, like why would you play him over Bryson, over Morikawa, who are all around the same price, over O'Bear? Like why would you play him over them? Because they're the better plays. And so like I haven't been able to get there with Brooks this week. US Open or PGA Championship, I was fine to get there, but he's just a little bit too high priced. Like if he was slotted where he should be, which is probably around like 9 point, he should be less than Morikawa. If he was less than Morikawa at like 9.3, I'd be fine to get to Brooks, but he's just a little bit too high priced this week. And let's see. If you are only making 10 lineups here, that's a good question. I would honestly focus more on single entry contests, especially in majors where there's going to be enough contests out there for single entry contests that are big enough that are going to be worthwhile for you, or those 3 entry max contests. That way you can still get different by doing your 10 different lineups. And if one of those hits where you're getting a little bit unique, at least you're set up for a contest where you're going to get paid off for that uniqueness, if that makes sense. And so single entry contest for sure. And then I would go with 3 entry max after that. There's no need to do like 20 entry max contest if you're not going to do 20 entries, if that makes sense. And so that's exactly what Matt kind of just said. Yeah, I wouldn't do 20. I wouldn't do 20 max if you are only doing 10 lineups, unless you're going to double them up together, which I still wouldn't suggest. But yeah, good call out there. Um, and then all right, let me get back into this Henley one and Norn one real quick, and then we'll jump into some more stuff here. So let's see. They're both priced about the same here. So Henley's a little bit higher owned. And so in that specific example, and this is kind of why I like this tool, is that this can be the small difference maker for you. So how Henley is currently being projected owned, people are kind of valuing him. He needs to finish top 10 to return that value, whereas Norn only needs to finish top 30. And so the slight edge would be Norn, ownership wise. So again, they're both basically the same play on paper. So just go with Norn there. All right, so we got this question, and then I'll jump back into it here as well. Yeah, so I don't mind this idea. At the same time, I hope you're doing a without market then on Scotty, because I would still argue that like 3.25 to 1 or 3.5 to 1 is still not terrible odds for Scotty. Like he's still an elite play. He ranks number 1 or better in all the key metrics that we look at in terms of predictability. So like to still get him at 3.5 to 1 is those are still pretty good odds. But yeah, if you're not doing Scotty, you got to do Morikawa. I think Hideki makes a ton of sense. And Aubert. I think Aubert does set up to potentially do what Morikawa did for his major win, for his first major win. Now, Morikawa had won previously on the PGA Tour, but Aubert's game setups extremely well. These two players, Morikawa and Aubert, I mean, basically ideal. And Aubert is kind of like on paper, stat wise, is kind of the same as Morikawa was when he won his it was the PGA championship, but I mean, crazy. 5th best ball striking, 3rd best total driving, and effective birdie to bogey ratio, which is that combination stat of bogey avoidance and birdie to bogey ratio. 2nd in that. And so the big question was, all right, is he injured? You know, a lot of people were wondering that last week. I mean, probably not 5th place finish. There is that slight concern, but I mean, if you're betting him, like who cares, right? You're chasing the upside with him. DFS wise, there's a little bit more risk in there if he is actually injured. But yeah, I think those 3 all make a ton of sense. Those are all 3 that, let me pull up the write up here. I think I was on all right wise. I was kind of not lazy with the write up, but I had already put out so much content that I was just like, all right, we don't need to do that much. All right, so this is what I went with so far. I'm adding Hideki in there for sure. And then Aubert is like the biggest question mark, and I probably am still going to go with him as well. Their odds are still pretty strong as well. So we'll get into that in just a second as well. Noren or Horschel? Noren for me, but I played Noren a lot more this year already. And so maybe a little bit of bias. Like he has some of my trust. He's only let me down once. Where Billy Horschel, you're catching him more on the upslope of good form, where Noren's just been in good form for quite some time. I think a good example of what I mean by that is a lot of people were on Victor Hovland last week, kind of trying to get lucky, whereas they could have just went with Colin Morikawa a lot. You know, I think that's a good example where like Hovland had just found his form slightly. And so that one bad round that he had, not shocking. Whereas Morikawa had been in great form for quite some time. And so it's just a little bit more consistency there. All right. So let's go ahead and jump on into round 1, like talk and coverage here. So might need to reload these tools here. We'll see on my end. That might take a second. No, we're good. Okay. So for round 1, again, it's pretty simple. Xander's number 1 again. Scotty number 2. Those 2 you can basically do one or the other. Okay, they've been very consistent in that regard. Very tilted last week again with another close first round leader miss. Kind of okay with Adam Hadman. 2 weeks ago was more tilting with David Skins. That was annoying. But I typically do like to do early tee times only when first round leader betting. So let's take a peek at that. And wow. So Colin Morikawa, dang, peg. Yeah, maybe not doing that. I mean, I'm still definitely doing it. Like, all right, Connors, Morikawa, Cam Smith, Aubert. So typically I do the top 5%. And it's been pretty fruitful, over the past 3 years. But the weather's not too crazy. We got the weather up. I mean, this is not crazy. 8 mile per hour winds is nothing at all. And it's not supposed to pick up throughout the day as well. So I don't like, I would suggest still doing these 4. Very happy to do that. And we'll pull up their odds as well. And so looking at, Corey Connors, 66-1 first round lead. It's a very big edge bet that you can get. Maybe if you are someone that bets on BetMGM where they pay out ties, just top 10 bet on him. Like, I'm fine with that. Colin Morikawa, 28-1 on FanDuel and DraftKings. Like that there. Cam Smith, 45-1 on DraftKings and FanDuel. Don't mind that. BetMGM probably still a little bit of a better bet. Bet365, 50-1 for Cam Smith. Don't mind that. And if you think about it, if the greens are going to play a little bit more difficult than everyone would hope, I shouldn't say that. I think a lot of people in the golf space want the greens to be difficult. I don't like luck being a factor. Pretty much, you should get rewarded for hitting a good shot. You shouldn't get penalized for the greens being a little bit unplayable. Like, I don't want that personally. But if that does occur, Cam Smith, he has proven that he can play well on those conditions. So, I don't mind that for a first round lead. And then Aubert, 33-1, 35-1 on some sites. Feel pretty good about him, first round lead. And so then we open it up a little bit more, take out those early guys. So that leaves us with about 3 more first round leader bets. This distinction here, guys, why is Scotty 12-1 and Xander is 22-1? Xander has been a stud in the first, and I know Scotty has as well. Don't get me wrong, but Xander has 2 first round leads over his past 4 starts. Had a really good round going last week as well. That should not be that different there. And I think Scotty 12-1, I'd be fine to bet that as well still. And then probably Bryson as well. Then I'm kind of okay with that. That's our 7 first round leader bets that also give us our 5% first round leader bet. So I'm okay with doing that. And so real quickly, let's go ahead now and then jump on into kind of the showdown portion of this. And I grouped these together because, well, it just makes sense. It's very closely related in terms of how you should be going about doing that. So let's do that real quick. And we don't need to do much. If I want to be on Scotty a little bit more, let's just bump up his projection to like 6. Let's do 70. And let's just say we want to be on him 30% of our builds. Maybe not much more than that. Same thing with Xander. We'll do 30. So I'm trying to tell the data that I want to be on those 2, and I'll even bump it up more just to ensure that I'm really telling the data, put those 2 in my builds. Could hit the lock button, but I don't want to do that. And then from there, it should be pretty much good to go. So we'll generate this. Could do some, slight different things. 3 unique players, 30% max anyways. So we'll generate this just so you guys can see what the optimizer is spitting out to us. We'll see. Let's see. So 30% Xander, 30% Scotty. That makes sense. But in terms of like top end builds, is pulling in Sam Burns. So maybe more of a better first round leader type player. But Corey Connors obviously going to be in there. Benny Ann going to be in there. Shane Lowry still tilted by his 85 on Sunday. If he doesn't shoot an 85 plus 13, I have a much better week last week. That was insane. Like, dude, just shoot average and you still give us a top 20 finish. Like, oh, God. But he's fine. He was fine. I'm kind of okay with that. Probably wouldn't want 30% of him. Probably wouldn't want 30% of Jason Day. Probably bring that down to 20. Same thing with Hatton. But I'm kind of fine with this. My biggest mistake when it comes to GPPs is just not letting the data do what the data does. So I think we get a good idea of round 1 coverage. And so let's shift and get into a little bit of the outright bets as well. So outright wise, you guys already saw some of my thoughts outright wise. I'll just recap that. So we'll sort it by the model rank here as well. All right. So looking at the odds that we are getting, okay, Scotty's has went down a little bit. So I would still be okay with him at 3-1. Anything lower than that, I do slightly worry about, but this still does feel like a lot like last week. So last week I was pretty much saying, all right, you're betting on the big three and then maybe Colin Morikawa as well, because those were kind of the three clear cut plays. It really felt like one of those three and then tossing Colin Morikawa, we're going to win. It didn't seem like there was a path, but on paper, it didn't seem like a path where those players weren't going to win. And we have that this week as well, maybe even a little bit more so, honestly. For as long as I've been doing this, I keep a log in terms of like the data and whatnot here. And so looking at the key metrics that we have, these 4 key metrics, every single time that there's been a player ranking out first in all these 4 key metrics, they have won. That's only happened 3 times. Okay. So this will only be the 4th time. And this goes back now 3 years. That being said, and I pulled this up, that player has never went against another player that was also top 6 or better in all those key metrics. And so we have 2 of those. And so again, that's where I'm like, the odds are probably a little bit better than they should be this week for those golfers. And I know a lot of people probably don't like hearing that. It's just how it is. And so 11-1 for Xander, I like. Rory's the one where I'm struggling with, because Rory, there was that news about him and his wife getting back together, which I hate golf reporting so much. The fact that someone was able to make up a story about him and Amanda, the reporter, potentially dating and stuff like that, completely out of nowhere, and people ran with it. It's just like golf reporting is just so bad. It's just engagement farming pretty much. And whatever, it's just annoying. But I think that's better for him mentally. The fact that he was able to kind of reconcile that relationship, probably for his daughter, I think, like that's probably a good thing, but we don't know how he's gonna be mentally. So he's like the one player data wise that is probably a little bit more on the fence for me, because we don't know mentally how he's gonna be. I think it's fine though. I don't know. I think Scotty, Xander make the most sense. Then we got Bryson, 20-1. Feel happy to do that. Colin Morikawa, 14, 16-1. 16-1 on DraftKings. Definitely doing that. Feel pretty good about that. So a little bit chalky on the top end, but kind of who cares? That's the board that we have. And then getting Hideki at 45-1 seems to be a steal to me. And if we look at it, we got some that are giving him at 35-1 and some that are 45-1. There really should not be that big discrepancy. Like, that's a lot. 35-1 to 10-1 is pretty big. And he's already someone that really pops. And so I don't mind that. He's like a strong outright bet. And then, yeah, Aubert, his game sets up extremely well. It wouldn't be shocking to see him win this week. I really wouldn't be shocked. 22-1, though, a little bit too small of odds for me. That's my biggest issue with him. And then, like, could I see Corey Connors winning? I could. Am I probably getting more line bias here? Yeah, I would say that's probably more of it. So like looking at 90-1 for Corey Connors when he shouldn't be, if that makes sense. Like compared to other players, he's a much better play. It's just he hasn't really done it at the US Opens. And so that's part of the reason as to why. But I do kind of view Corey Connors and Tommy Fleetwood somewhat the same, where they kind of feel a little bit like Gary Woodland when he won the US Open, where just insanely good stat fits. Pretty solid recent form. Just haven't been able to put it all together for a major. I could see those two winning. They've just been playing such good golf for such a long time. That kind of sums up the outright bets. So we got one more question coming in. So let's go ahead and answer that. How do I feel about Bazoo now? I'm fine with Seabaz. Seabaz is kind of a good play. I mean, across the board. I'm pulling them up on my end here. So he ranks out as someone that's going to be right around a made cut this week, but he's been solid enough. Top 20 in recent form rank. Just not the best staff fit, relatively speaking. Good specialist, 33rd in the field there. And again, the specialist data is pulling in all the unique characteristics for that week's tournament, for that course, and putting it all into one data point. So he ranks out 33rd in the field there. So don't mind that, but not exactly someone we need to be going crazy with. He's just someone that you plug in with a Rory build, with a Scotty build, with a Xander build. That's really the only path that you're ending up on. Really, anyone, really 6.5 and lower, salary wise on DraftKings. So now let's go ahead and jump on into some ownership here as well. So I already kind of showed you guys it. I will say I don't expect this to hold up. Like, this would seem egregious if this occurs. For Scotty to be 37%, that's fine. That's fine. But why would Xander not be 25, 20% owned? Or same thing with Rory. Like, that's just a big mistake. I'd be happy to be overweight on those two, especially Xander this week. Like 30% at least. I'd probably make him my highest owned golfer if this holds up into the night, because that is wrong. That is simply, I mean, it's laughable, honestly. I get it. A lot of people love the pricing on Collin Morikawa, and this is something that I wrote up as well. It's that had the pricing come out at its normal time, Collin Morikawa would be higher priced than Jon Rahm for sure. Jon Rahm probably would have been $9K. Brooks probably wouldn't have been as expensive as well. Hovland wouldn't have been that expensive as well. And Morikawa definitely would have been higher priced. And I would argue at only 20% on, that's still too low. And I get, you can't play everyone, but even if you still get 40% Scotty, you can still get enough of Rory, enough of Xander, and enough of Morikawa. There's been plenty of situations where I've been able to get Xander and Morikawa, Rory and Morikawa. Haven't really been able to get Scotty and Morikawa together. But that's, I mean, I get that with Scotty, you're most likely locking in a top 5 finish, whereas with Xander, you're most likely locking in a top 10 finish. And with Rory, you're more hoping for a win and a top 15 finish. Like, he's a little bit more spread there. But man, that shouldn't be happening. That's the biggest difference for me data wise. That's like, all right, we need to take advantage of those two ownerships. And that's what the data is telling us to do. And so if you're on Scotty at 37%, no moves needed. And I would say that's correct. Okay, he's being valued as someone that's going to finish top 5. That's what the odds would tell us as well. So, like, I'm not saying change that. It makes sense. 13K, I do think there's a path where even if he wins and you're on, let's say, Xander and Morikawa, and they finish top 5 again, I think you could have the winning lineup with those two in it rather than Scotty, given that price difference where you're able to get to, let's say, Seb Straka, he's over-owned right now, and that makes sense with the Scotty ownership. But that shouldn't be happening. Bazoon out, definitely too high owned. Like, those are kind of easy fades in that aspect to be underweight on the field. They're definitely coming in over-owned. Don't need to be that high in them, but you can be at like 10% on them. And like, so in comparison, we'll just scroll down here. Kurt Kitayama, just as good of a play as, Seabass and Seb Straka. Seb Straka, obviously, you're chasing the upside with him. You're chasing the top 10 finish like he has shown. Okay, he's risk reward. I get why people are on him. You don't need to be on him 14%, though, in order to get that, kind of upside still. Glover, I know he's coming in off of a miscut. He had been playing extremely well. Kind of expect him to bounce back. He's a decent leverage play. Harris English, definitely a fine play. Eckroat, I don't exactly like, but he's probably a little bit too low owned in comparison to those plays. Yeah, Billy Horschel, that's still coming in a little bit low owned as well. So I did think that was worth calling out, because that is a little bit crazy that we have a lot of strong pivots right there. And Aaron Rye, 7%, who cares that he's slightly popping up on that tool, like, whatever. But really, this is telling us Seabass definitely overvalued. Seb Straka, overvalued. But again, I get Seb Straka a little bit more. In terms of leverage, I will say Corey Connors not being 10% at 7.2, it feels wrong. Feels wrong. And especially when you compare him to Jam, who is 13%. And I get it. People are trying to chase that top 10 upside. It does make sense in that regard. But this is a tournament where the only T60 and ties make the cut. So I have been trying to if you get 6 for 6 across the cut line, you should be set up extremely well this week. And so going with a more safe play in Corey Connors makes sense. Benny Ann as well, I think makes sense. So I don't mind that. And then after that, I would say everything's mostly correct. And so let's get into the last part of this video. And I realize this is running long. Apologies there. We're going to get into the lineup builder. And again, if you guys have any questions, get those in. Happy to answer those. But we're going to jump into the lineup builder portion of this. And I'm not going to do anything too crazy just yet. I'm actually curious. I'm just going to run 150 lineups right now without changing anything, just to see what it spits out, while doing 30 max lineups. Let's see. So we got a question from Tom. Yeah, so that's what I have it down in the 9 to 5 database. I have it down as a links course, more of an American links course, if you will. I have 4 categories. So sometimes there's a little bit of overlap, but yeah, it's mostly closely related to a links course. I'll pull up the specialist data for that. I'll use the custom model real quick for that. Give me a second. Well, I pulled that up. But yeah, I mean, it is a links, but it's not a links as well. It's definitely kind of its own beast, and I think that's why the U.S. Open chose it. I'll get into that next question here as well. My computer always takes a little bit longer to load when I'm doing a live stream. Kind of is what it is. All right. All right. I realize you can't really see it on this screen. Let me go back to a different screen. I need to get a full view screen on here. This one should work though. All right. So just looking at the custom model, like you could look at the last 5, last 10, last 20, last 15, whatever. Doesn't really matter. Now we're not including sample sizes into this, and I can put that in there real quick. So how many starts in their last? How many starts are going into this? So like Harry Higgs, we can see there's like 1 going into this. So like who cares? Tom Kim, we got a decent amount going in there. So he's good on these courses. Benny Ann plays pretty well on link style courses. John Rahm, historically speaking, plays well in them. Xander, so there's some benefits of looking at that, but I don't think we need to go crazy with that. The way I set up with the specialist data is it's the last 7 starts. So let's look at this a little bit more. I like doing that a little bit more. So style of course, it's going to be preset to links. No minimum though. And so Rory, Cam Smith, no shock there, right? I already kind of mentioned that. Tom Kim, a little bit shocked by that. I guess I didn't really look into that too much. Hatton, then we saw Higgs did have that small sample size, 1 start. Tommy Fleetwood, Xander, Højgaard, Grant Forrest again. So we're getting some small samples in there. So Scotty ranks out 17th, but part of this sample is some of those link style courses that we get, they are subject to heavy winds. And so that is a whole nother thing. So that does sometimes skew the data as well. It's not like we can just take the winds, the heavy winds, the bad weather out of the link style courses data that we have, if that makes sense. Let's see. So this definitely depends on 2 things. One, if it's cash or not cash. I believe your question is for GPPs. This definitely depends on each week and the pricing each week as well. So like no cut events, we know studs and duds do that. That's the best route to go. Just in general. This week, I would say mix and match it. Honestly, like this week is difficult in that aspect. Fair and balanced, I have been going with a little bit more because you still can somewhat get Scotty. Ryan Fox, not terrible as well. Yeah, that's the issue this week. I don't really have a good answer. That's where I was saying it is tough lineup process wise because it's too easy lineup process wise. So there's not like a direct correct lineup process. No, this is difficult to do. And let's see if I can do a Scotty Morikawa build real quick. I really need to find a new place to put my camera. I'm always like bumping and weaving over here. So I guess, I mean, you could. It's not terrible, and that's why Bazoonhound and Substrucker are as high owned as they are, because people are doing that. I would argue you don't need to do that. Like Norin, we could play, and then we could even go Henley as well. And then who would we get off of here? Maybe Burns, and then Aaron Rye we could go with. Like, I mean, that's why those players are as high owned as they are. So like you can make that work. But I wouldn't be too worried about ownership this week as a whole, or like lineup wise as a whole, because there shouldn't be duped lineups this week with how strong a build you can make just across the board. There's not like, again, there's not one central lineup path that people should be playing this week. It should be spread out. There shouldn't be duped lineups. I know that there's always there's people in cash that play terrible cash builds because they're just pulling them in from a popular lineup optimizer. So that shouldn't be the case this week, just as an FYI. Let's see. Oh, what's the difference between cash and GPP? So cash contests are either you're doing double ups, like 50-50s, so like head to heads and as well, or single entry double ups, which is, I haven't checked in a while. I think it's 47% or 48%, something like that. 46% maybe. Typically acts as fit. Like that's what I go to. That's kind of my bread and butter, are the single entry double ups for cash. GPPs, guaranteed prize pools, those are just like 20% of the field cashes. Depending on the contest, it might be a little bit different. So it's a lot more difficult to cash, but typically when you do hit the profit line, I should say, the green line, the payout's better. You're trying to chase winning the contest in GPPs is basically what it is. Cash, you're just trying to double up, basically, if that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, Cam Smith, I would be on so much more if it weren't for that PGA Championship result. But at the same time, it's kind of like, who cares, Like, so that's my biggest issue with him, though. Yeah, no problem. So let's jump back into the lineup builder, and then that's going to be it. This video did run much longer than it typically would, but it's a major. You guys had a bunch of questions. Happy to answer those when I can. And so again, if you guys haven't signed up for the 9to5 write-up, you can do that. I do this every single week. It's easily the most underutilized tool, I think, in fantasy golf in the industry. Not even joking. It's free. I made it free this year. Take advantage of that. Scroll down to the bottom. Sign up. That's all you got to do. Let's see. So yes, looking at the lineup builder, let's just see the percent ownerships here. I'm just curious. And it's still going more of the fair and balanced approach. That's kind of the theme. But we are still getting 30% of Xander. And that's the thing, by opening up more, by doing more lineups, you're going to get more exposure to more golfers instead of doing like 20 or 10 lineups, which just naturally makes sense. But based off of this, probably still a little bit too much Hatton. I probably want to get a little bit less Shane Lowry. And I'm only getting 4% Scotty Scheffler right now with this run. And so that basically tells me I need to bump up Scotty's projection a little bit more, or I could just simply lock Scotty into 30%, which is what I did with Xander. Or a rule I could do as well. And simple as, I want at least one of these three in all my builds. And I'm tossing in Collin Morikawa. If you guys look at the write-up again, where's that at? Too many tabs open. I'm clicking through all of them here. I'll show you the player pool real quick. Like I went ahead and I made those those four just the core plays. Like that's what we should be trying to chase there. And so I don't mind doing that. I want at least one of those in all my builds. And that's probably what I'm going to do. No, I'm not going to run that right now. because I got to get out of here again, going on 50 minutes. But that's what I'm going to be doing with these builds. So that is going to be all for this video. Appreciate everyone being here. Got 100 views in here right now. You guys can like the video before you leave if you are on YouTube. If you guys are on Twitter, also leave a thumbs up. That's awesome. And I love the fact that we had people in from Twitter, people in from YouTube. That's pretty awesome. I'm streaming to both right now, in case you guys didn't catch that. But thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it. Good luck with your US Open builds and bets this week. I like that. I've never used that. I'm going to have to use that. All right. And as always, let's keep cashing with your builds and bets. That kind of worked. All right. Peace out, everyone.